Yeah, hi. Thank you very much to Vicky for inviting me along today to meet all of you guys. Horizons is something that I'm hugely passionate about, and I think it's just such a fantastic thing for our industry to have, something really unique to supply chain within this industry. And yeah, just a pleasure to be here talking to this cohort of Horizons participants. So yeah, I'm Emily Tom. I'm the supply chain director for Northern Europe at General Mills. And for those of you who are not familiar with General Mills, we work with lots of brands across 7 different categories. So brands up on the screen that I am sure a lot of you are familiar with and will have tried in the past. So we work across brands in 3 temperature states, so chilled, frozen and ambient. We work with products with very short shelf life, with yogurt to canned vegetables, which have an annual harvest and obviously long shelf life. So lots and lots of variety in terms of brands and how we kind of work across our end-to-end supply chains. So one of the traditions at General Mills is whenever anybody introduces, the first thing you do on day one is to pull your postcard together. And this is just a way that we kind of introduce ourselves to new people within the organization. So I reckon I pull up my postcard probably once every couple of weeks. So it is very much an ingrained tradition at General Mills. So a bit about me, I started my career in supply chain straight from university. I'm a chemist graduate, and I joined Kraft Foods on their graduate scheme. Worked in customer services and supply planning before Kraft acquired Cadbury and we became Mondelez, and I worked in project management roles, and I was demand planning manager for the chocolate category. 4 years ago, I joined General Mills as Yoplait supply chain manager, and I've been supply chain director for all of our brands across Northern Europe for the last 3.5 years. So when people ask me, what is it that you love about your job and working in supply chain? There's 3 things that come to mind. The first one is I love working on great brands and I love working with great people. And throughout my career, I've had the opportunity to work with some amazing brands, well-loved brands, and also had the opportunity to work with some really inspiring people, which has really been demonstrated in the recent COVID pandemic as everybody came together. The second thing I love is I love variety. Every day is different, and I have never been bored. So that is really, really important to me. And then finally, and probably one of the reasons why I'm so passionate about this Horizon scheme, growth and development, something really important to me, whether that's developing new processes. There's so many opportunities in supply chain for continuous improvement and always moving forward, or developing teams and seeing people step up and deliver things that they didn't believe were achievable, and down to my personal growth as well. I spend my time constantly trying to get in my comfort zone, and the minute I'm in my comfort zone, I try to get out of it again. So I like to do things that kind of give that little bit of a pit in my stomach on an evening before work, because that kind of means that I'm moving forward and keeps the excitement levels up. So yeah, growth and development really important. So I actually did the closing Horizons event, was part of the panel, and I remember making a comment at that panel about how there would be no supply chain presentation without talking about the B word or Brexit. And now there is no supply chain presentation without talking about coronavirus. And who would have thought back in February just how much coronavirus has come to shape our lives in terms of how we have managed the last few months. I certainly would never have anticipated anything like this within my career. And no matter who you are, everybody has been touched by the pandemic. And obviously in supply chain, and all of you guys have all had unique challenges to work through associated with coronavirus. But I'm just going to give you some insight in terms of both professionally, what we've been grappling with at General Mills, personally as well, and also some of the key learnings that I've seen as we start to, at this stage, move more from I guess crisis management to managing the crisis. So this is a very spiky graph, just to give you a flavour of what we've been going through. And as I said, we work across 7 different categories, 3 different temperature states. And what has been fascinating in this pandemic is just seeing how each of our brands and each of our categories has reacted so differently to the changes in circumstances that we're all facing. So the dotted black line at the moment is kind of normal demand. And if I think about Green Giant in the green line, we saw this massive peak as everybody started to panic before lockdown and wanted to start filling their cupboards with canned vegetables in preparation for potential food shortages, and that has started to stabilise off. Then schools closed. Betty Crocker, Just Roll, we turned into a nation of bakers. Flour shortages, you walk down the baking aisle and really it was incredible just to see how much people were picking up, and we saw, particularly on our Betty Crocker but also on our dough brands, just really high levels. And on Betty, that has maintained. It started to soften a little bit, but it is still significantly up. Old El Paso started to peak as soon as offices closed and restaurants started to close, just with the meal occasions, people doing more scratch cooking at home. Interestingly, Haagen-Dazs actually took a little bit of a dip to start with, and the reason for that was, as people were filling their freezers with staple products, there wasn't so much room for luxury ice cream, and we also saw more focus being put from a resource in terms of just making sure that we had those staple items available. So we did actually see a little bit of a dip in sales to start. And then as we went into May and June, the weather came out, more people at home, and certainly we saw a really big peak in demand there, which has maintained. Yoplait, at a macro level, has been pretty stable for us, but we have lots of different brands across our yogurt portfolio. So we have kind of lunchbox formats, which obviously have declined with less lunchbox occasions. We've got on-the-go products like our Yop drinks, which are part of meal deals. So there was some drop off there. But then you look at kind of kids yogurt, pot yogurts, that increased as more people, more parents were giving that to their children at home, and that format. So it again was quite volatile, even though it looks flat on the surface. Underneath there was a lot of demand volatility to grapple with. And snacks has seen a little bit of a decline, more of an impulse category, more of an on the go. So yeah, a slightly different dynamic we've been managing there, but that has certainly stabilized in recent months as more people are out and about. So a huge amount of volatility, and I guess the key is a huge amount of unplanned volatility. If you see spikes like this, usually you prepare yourself and you plan, and normally the seasonality that you see on your brands is relatively similar. This just caught everybody off guard, and everybody had to put in a huge amount of effort to respond, to try and get the product on the shelf as quickly as possible. And so this is kind of what's going on in the business world. And then I guess I'm used to, kind of from a supply chain perspective, doing things in the background more, I guess, and getting stuff done. Not used to certainly showing up on Sky News and talking about food supply chain. This is just something that was, as I said earlier, that kind of pit in your stomach. Certainly when I was asked to do a live interview with no idea what the questions were, that was one of those occasions. But I think the demonstration of that is, never has food supply chain been so talked about, and so critical, and obviously with everybody being classed as key workers, the profile that we have as a supply chain now, whether that's internally, whether that's whether that's with our consumers, has never been higher. And it's how do we think about that looking forward, in terms of when we're encouraging people to come and work in supply chain, and also celebrating all of the great work that goes on in supply chain without necessarily needing a crisis to share all of that great work that's been going on. So yeah, that's as I said, kind of me presenting on Sky News with my bedroom in the background. You'll be able to see it. I'm in that same room, although it's a little bit messier now. And I guess that's one of the things, isn't it? You're doing your work, but suddenly your personal and your work life is properly merging. And most of my time at work is all about kind of moving boxes, and then suddenly I'm using a box to entertain my kids at home, trying to homeschool my 5-year-old, and yeah, it's the ultimate in flexibility, agility, trying to work around that everybody who's got kids, everybody who's got personal things going on, we've just had to work through them. And yeah, it's been testing at times. I am pleased to have both my boys in childcare today. It definitely helps. From somebody who has always been quite a compartmentalizer in terms of, when I'm at work, I'm at work, when I'm at home, I'm at home. Suddenly, my way of working was completely tipped on its head, and having to adapt to that, and how I could make that work for me. So, as I was thinking about the last few months and the COVID pandemic, there were 3 words that sprung to mind. The first is agility, and I've used that word time and time again, but really it just springs to life. The speed at which new processes were put into place across the end-to-end supply chain, whether that's working with our suppliers, whether that's working within our internal supply chain, or whether that's been working with customers, has been remarkable. And I think one of the things that that I've seen is, we in supply chain, and I'm generalizing, but we are a factual bunch. We deal with data and analytics, and we are measured in our approach in terms of moving forward. And one of the things that I've seen is, people haven't been afraid to make mistakes. We've just had to get on and do it without too much thinking. You spot an opportunity and you move. It's not 100% perfect to start with. You iterate and you improve. You make mistakes along the way, you learn from it. But as we've moved across, certainly we are in a better place from a process perspective that will actually last much longer than a COVID pandemic. So it's just been incredible to see the teams adapting to work from home, adapting to new processes, and moving forward with pace. The second thing is collaboration, and I touched on that. The work done across the end-to-end supply chain to try to, essentially, this common goal of feeding the nation, essentially, and trying to get as much product on the shelves at our supermarkets, has meant that the teams, I have in my career never seen such collaboration. And obviously from a Horizons perspective and from an IGD perspective, collaboration is absolutely in the DNA of what we try to achieve, and I think it's just demonstrated the ability across the supply chain of everybody to be able to collaborate effectively. And then the third word that comes to mind is just the dedication, the hours that I'm sure you guys have put in, the commitment to getting product on shelves has just been really, really inspiring, impressive. It's been hard, but you know, you hear the word heroes banded around, and I have seen a lot of truly amazing effort and really heroic actions across, as I said, across the end-to-end supply chain, whether that's people in our manufacturing facilities, whether that's people in our supermarkets, whether it's people just showing up and working as hard as they can to deliver the best outcome possible. So hugely impressive, and I've never felt prouder to be in supply chain. Yeah, it's going to be great to take forward the improvements in agility, collaboration, with that knowledge of what a great team we have forward to hopefully some calmer times.
Brilliant, thank you, Emily. That was a really really helpful and valuable presentation and kind of overview of how things have gone from a General Mills perspective. I'm just looking at the chat box, and there are a couple of questions in there, so we've got time for just a couple. The first one is, how did the customer relationship evolve during the pandemic with retailers during this time? You know, was it more collaborative?
I would say in the first few weeks, everybody was just so hands on deck, just trying to sort everything out, that it was almost very kind of, we just got on and did stuff, and it was providing as much communication as we can, but it was very, very fast paced, and it was I guess the collaboration element came a little bit afterwards, when people had a bit more time to breathe and reflect, and it didn't take long for it to come. But to start with, I think all of us were a little bit stunned, and there was that kind of feeling at the start, oh, there'll just be this short-term peak, and then things will stabilize quickly, so we'll blast through all of our safety stocks, and then things will start to stabilize a bit, before within a matter of days realizing that actually no, this is going to be something that is long term. It's going to be marathon, not a sprint, and therefore really making sure across the end-to-end supply chain that we are collaborating becomes very, very critical. In my experience, I found no instances where collaboration wasn't strong, whether that's with suppliers, whether that's retailers, because I think everybody had this shared purpose of, it's about trying to get the stock out. And I think one of the things I knew, but one of the things that was reiterated, is just that importance for clarity of communication, transparency, clarity of communication. Then you can have the right conversations, and then you can collaborate and find the right solutions. So that's something that we've tried to, as General Mills, and tried to do as much of, be as transparent as the situation may not be great, and we may not be able to deliver everything that's required, but this is the situation, and this is what we're doing about it, and then you work through those challenges together.
Brilliant. I think the next question kind of talks around the agility side of things that you were talking about, in terms of the spikes that were unprecedented, patterns that you've never seen before, and having to work in quite a different way. And are there any lessons learned from how you handled the pandemic that you think will change sort of how you operate moving forward into kind of our new normal?
I think I touched on earlier the fact that we built new processes and new ways of doing things very, very quickly. We're not afraid to make mistakes as we went along the way, and didn't necessarily wait to have all of the data before we moved forward. And I think one of the things that I think's been really important is, how do we celebrate progress in terms of moving forward, potentially making mistakes along the way, but learning from them, versus just celebrating the finished perfect article. And that's something I want to make, what we've been talking about a lot in supply chain, is how do we take that mentality forward? Because I guess that speed and that agility is critical, and you will come out with a better place, versus kind of waiting maybe 6 months to develop the perfect solution. And I think we've spent a lot of time particularly on the demand area. How can you quickly get those demand insights versus necessarily this monthly peak or S&OP process you go through? Actually, our trends were changing on a weekly, daily basis. And so you suddenly have to adapt and put new processes in place, which actually will be more beneficial long term. So I think that's the key. It's progress over perfection. Yes, data is absolutely important, but sometimes you just know as well from a gut perspective, and just trial it and see if it works.
Brilliant, thank you. I think final question here. Have you managed to maintain a good morale across the organisation with an increase in kind of, lots of more higher workload and challenges that people are kind of constantly sort of working on? So is morale still quite high, or?
So I think everybody's journey with morale throughout this crisis has been kind of a little bit like this. But I think one of the pieces that's really helped from a morale perspective is that recognition that supply chain have experienced, and never have supply chain in my experience, experienced such recognition from across the function. I talk about suddenly being in the limelight, but I also have seen just people wanting to help. So whether people from other areas of the supply chain, or equally people from other areas of the business who have put their hand up and seen people struggling and said, what can I do to help? And this culture of how can I help has really helped people along the way. So we've had people from sales supporting in terms of logistics, some more of the administrative stuff, just to help us along the way. We've had people from demand planning, capability improvements, project work, coming in and getting on the front line and helping us with some of those weekly demand planning insight. And I think when you see that, and everybody stepping in and everybody working together, it helps morale. I always say in a crisis, you go one of two ways. It either makes you as a team or it breaks you as a team. And I think throughout the COVID pandemic, my experience certainly has been it's made the team. And so I do think that has helped with morale. I'd also say, I mean, we were very fortunate. We have our annual conference in June, July every year, and we obviously did it virtually this year. And there's always an awards section of kind of great work done throughout the year. Never have I seen so much supply chain acknowledgement in awards, so many nominations, and then we cleaned up at the awards, and so I do think that recognition has really helped with team morale. Obviously there's been dips, and it's about how we as line managers, team members, peers identify when people are maybe struggling, and as I say, help out and see what we can do to support. But that recognition has been a really important thing, and something that I think we need to think about. How can we get this to live on and not just rely on a crisis for that?